How are you guys doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, coming to you live today on Tuesday, October 8th, now officially through 5 weeks of the NFL season. And with that, we got some more games to recap today, but of course we're going to talk about the biggest news of the day, the New York Jets firing head coach Robert Saleh after the first 5 weeks. Completely unexpected, so we're going to go into discussing it and analyzing it and giving you guys my thoughts on it as well. We're going to talk about the game last night between the Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs. Stick around for that. And before we get started, I'd like to remind you guys, if you guys have any questions or comments or any opinions you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to use it and share it with me during today's show. If you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on today's show, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the new Super Chat feature that you see on your screen and that we have available to you guys just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So again, get involved with the show, send in a question, make a comment or anything like that, and use the new Super Chat feature to make it sure that it's absolutely guaranteed that I see it, I read it out loud, and we make it more conversational, more interactive. It's a lot more exciting, and we always value your guys' interactions each and every time. So make sure to do that. Use the Super Chat button and get involved with the show. But with that being the case now, we're going to start off with last night's game first off before we get into the Jets news, because I need a whole segment to talk about that. So we're going to start off with the Kansas City Chiefs. A big win last night for the Chiefs, despite all their injuries, despite missing Pacheco, Rashee Rice now, and the latest news on him. Obviously, Hollywood Brown not being there as well. And the Chiefs did enough to get the job done, right? They kept pace with the Minnesota Vikings after last night's win to remain perfect over the New Orleans Saints. Both now the Vikings and the Chiefs still remain the only undefeated teams. The Chiefs won last night's game 26-13 to go to 5-0, while the Saints dropped their third game in a row and now are 2-3 on the season. This time around, the Saints put in their second lowest point total of the season, 13 points against the Chiefs. Obviously, just 1 point above their lowest of the season against the Philadelphia Eagles a couple weeks ago, where they also lost that game, that time at home. And looking at the performances out of this game, you're thinking, who's going to step up for, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Pacheco, right? Who's going to step up for the Chiefs outside of just Travis Kelce, right? None other than a blast from the past, two former Chiefs coming back to rejoin the squad and having great games on the night. Kareem Hunt on your left and JuJu Smith-Schuster on your right. And just looking at these two guys, right, Kareem Hunt, 27 carries for 102 yards, and he scored a touchdown. Then JuJu Smith-Schuster, right, 7 receptions, 130 yards, tacked on to Travis Kelce's 9 receptions and 70 yards as well. And Mahomes, he did his thing, 28 for 39 for 331 yards. No touchdowns, but 1 interception in the game. And it was, from the number standpoint, you're looking at 102, 130. Mahomes threw for over 330. You're thinking that, this was a great game for the Kansas City Chiefs offense, but they did struggle a little bit in the red zone. I'm pretty sure they were 2 for 7 or something like that. So, obviously, room to improve there, but still, getting performances like Kareem Hunt, like JuJu Smith-Schuster's is an amazing sign to see, obviously. So that's great to see from those two guys. Like I mentioned, Travis Kelce, having back-to-back games now that he's recorded 7+ receptions and 70+ yards. Last week he did it against the Chargers. Now he continues it this week. And on the other side, the Saints, only 13 points. They really struggled, like we said on the preview, where we said that the injuries to the offensive line were really going to make it tough for them to kind of make it so multi-dimensional that the Chiefs have a hard time trying to stop the run, trying to stop the pass. And it became a troubling thing because Derek Carr finished 18 of 28 for only 185 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. He left that game with an oblique injury. He did not return, obviously. And on that running game, right? You look at Alvin Kamara and his output, he recorded 11 carries for 26 yards, which was the lowest so far of the year for him. Rashee Shaheed had a nice game, 4 receptions for 86 yards, and that 43-yard touchdown, which was great to see at that point in time where it got them closer. But again, we're talking about a marathon, so to speak, right? Not just the one play where you get close. You got to make this a whole series of things throughout the game that you can build on and keep pace with the Chiefs. And I just felt like the offensive line issues were going to make it extremely hard for the Saints to go ahead and do that. And then you also look at Chris Olave, right? 2 receptions for 10 yards. Again, his worst performance of the year. And, in a sense, the Chiefs, because their defense is pretty good as it is, they don't really have to over-focus on maybe the running game. They could focus on taking away Chris Olave because the running game they might not feel as worried about because the offensive line's banged up. They don't feel like they could necessarily out-muscle them or just, outmaneuver them just one-on-one. So you got more guys allocated to try and taking away Chris Olave, and then from that point on, you're chasing the game now, so Kamara's not really running the ball, and then it just gets all out of sorts, right? And looking at the game a little bit closer and the actions that transpired in this game, it was a bad start for the Saints, honestly. Much like Joe Burrow mentioned, I think it was a great quote that he said when he said that he had to be perfect, near perfect, to defeat the Baltimore Ravens, and he basically was, and he got as close as you can get to beating them, and I feel like that goes the same for anybody that's going into Arrowhead trying to beat the Chiefs. And you can't have a start like this. Derek Carr, on the first possession of the game, he gets pressured. He tries to throw it out of bounds. Of course, he doesn't mean to throw the interception, but it was a very weird throw, very high throw, and it obviously didn't have the weight to carry fully out of bounds, and they throw an interception right then and there. And the Chiefs score right after that. The drive right after that, their first drive of the game, Kareem Hunt scores a touchdown, and now they're down 7-0 with getting the ball first. So now you're chasing the game already, and after a few punts and Kansas City kicks a couple field goals, the Saints showed that resilience, like I said, where Rashee Shaheed scored that touchdown to make it 10-7. So now, after a bad start, you're thinking, all right, we're right there. 3 points, let's keep this going. But again, it's hard to do that with the running game being so withered down, with your offensive lineman being out and you not being able to fully run the ball is one thing, but also use play action. Now Steve Spagnuolo is blitzing Derek Carr every other play and whatnot. So it's hard really to gain any momentum from that point. It's too spotty to beat the Chiefs, if that makes sense, especially when they get performances like this. And then Kansas City led at halftime with a 16-7 score. And then after a few chances, they had to take the lead. They missed a couple. They missed a field goal and an interception at the goal line by Kalen Saunders by the New Orleans Saints that kind of gave them a little bit of hope. But, after that, Foster Moreau scored a touchdown, and then you're back to 3 points. So, again, you're right there. But it always felt like, I don't know if it was just me, I never really felt too concerned about the Saints maybe beating the Chiefs. They got close, but you always got to get a feel for it. I feel like you could always tell when a team's really serious about coming back or whatnot. And I was never really worried. I don't know if the Chiefs ever felt worried. They just gave up a lot of big plays on defense as well. And, the Chiefs did a good job of responding with another touchdown after that Foster Moreau touchdown to Xavier Worthy to pretty much end it after that because the Saints went 4-and-out twice, and that was pretty much the ball game. So, after the game, thinking about both of these teams, while Kansas City won, they were 2-7 in the red zone, and the protection for Mahomes, at least on the outsides, the tackle position looks a little bit questionable. So that's something that obviously they're going to have to get better at going forward. But really the main takeaway from this was that they were able to take advantage of an injured group with the Saints through the big plays by JuJu Smith-Schuster, and Patrick Mahomes had a great day on the ground running it as well. They just find ways to win. And with the Saints, you talk about that interception from Derek Carr and the injuries. It's not a great recipe to try and beat the Chiefs. That always feels like they know exactly what to do in the big moments. So it was always going to be an uphill battle. But looking at the Saints now, talking about them going forward, the question is, how concerning is this, right? Because they started off so hot, and now you lose 3 in a row, and Derek Carr is reportedly set to miss a couple of weeks now with that oblique injury. So, what is this Saints team going to be now? After such a promising start, your quarterback's not going to be there. What does this mean for Davante Adams? Is he going to want to be there if Derek Carr's not there? All of these things where it seems like the Saints were, getting to a place where they could have competed this year. Now it all seems like in a matter of weeks, it has all just crumbled down. And, they do have a lot of injuries, but, after losing 3 straight now that they have to host Tampa Bay on Sunday, now they're already 0. The Saints are 0-2? No, they're 0-1 in the division already. Or excuse me, they're 1-1 because they beat the Panthers and lost to the Falcons. So these next divisional games are going to be important now without Derek Carr. What is this team going to be before or after when Derek Carr comes back, right? Are they going to be close to 500? Or are they just going to continue losing? It's a dangerous spot where the Chiefs are standing right now. The Saints need this upcoming win more than the Buccaneers do, I believe, but I don't know if it's attainable now with Derek Carr being injured. So the Saints right now, if I were to put it on a 1 to 10 scale, I would probably say like around a 6 or a 7 if I'm a Saints fan, because, no quarterback now, divisional game, you don't want to drop to 1-2. And, from that point on, I don't know exactly what the rest of their schedule is, but you don't know when Derek Carr's coming back. So how does that dictate everything you try to do? It's not a great place to be for the Saints, as much as, they look good at the start. They have good players, but a lot of unfortunate turns of events right now for them to kind of feel better than, I think, a 6 or a 7 on a worry scale, right? So that's just me. But speaking of bad scenarios for teams, I don't think it can get much worse than the New York Jets. We're going to get into the firing of Robert Saleh now after this upcoming break. Why did they do it? My thoughts on it, and, what can we expect now from the Jets moving forward? All of that coming up right after this break. We'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Thank you guys for joining me back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And now getting to the biggest news, certainly of the day, probably of the entire week, and maybe, just maybe, depending on how the Jets do in the rest of the month of October, maybe the biggest news of the month. At least the most impactful one, I believe, because this move, I think, impacts so much. And the news I'm talking about, obviously, you can read it on your screen. The news broke this morning from ESPN's Adam Schefter that the New York Jets have made the decision to fire head coach Robert Saleh, a move that comes only after 5 weeks of the 2024 season. They have a 2-3 record right now, and after another bad-looking loss to the Minnesota Vikings, the Jets, their owner, Woody Johnson, felt like this was the appropriate decision to take to get this team back on track and looking like the team they all envisioned, right? And I understand with this move, and I couldn't believe it, honestly, when I saw it this morning. I was like prepping for the show and everything like that and writing everything down, and I saw the tweet by Adam Schefter, and I'm thinking it's completely fake. I understand that the Jets aren't looking great, right? Rodgers not looking great. A lot of turnovers, 3 just in his last game. People are starting to worry in New York. The market is crazy over there. The amount of pressure you have there. The Jets specifically, right, going all in this season, getting Rodgers, getting Hassan Reddick, even though he's not there, bringing in the new offensive line pieces, getting Mike Williams in here as well. They had this 1 to 2 year window where they needed, I don't know, people are saying Super Bowl, but I never really bought that as being realistic, but at least like the conference championship or anything like that, right? The amount of pressure that this team was facing, I understand that the margin of error and the leash, so to speak, was going to be extremely short, but even still, this kind of felt like it was trending towards, being a bad situation, right, with how the team was looking. So I understand all of that. I get it. But still, I hate this move so much because it just felt like there was no news or reports leading up to this that this could happen. Yeah, maybe you thought about it, that it could happen eventually at this year, but not after 5 games. It just felt like a panicked, premature, impulsive move by the Jets as an organization to try and create a change, right? Not sticking it out. And this made me think instantly of, because I'm a Steelers fan, and when, Steelers fans, I'm sure any fan following their team in the NFL, but when anybody's crying out for a change in your organization, for the head coach, the offensive coordinator last year for the Steelers, it always feels like it becomes such a drag, right? It becomes such a drag that fans are clamoring for it. There needs to be this change, this change, or this change. But it always feels like the good organizations try to wait it out a little bit, try to feel it out, and they don't make these impulsive, just panicked moves just because they're feeling a little bit of heat. And I know the Jets are in a crazy market, obviously, in New York, and with their recent history. And coming off of the back of last year, the entire narrative was that the Jets were only a quarterback away. Just wait until they get a good quarterback. Once the trade was announced, everything changed, right? The expectations went from like about a 2 to like over a 10, right? Obviously. But I understand all of that, the pressure that this team was feeling, but even still, it felt like this team, if you were going to fire him, you could have done it a little bit later, right? And now some people might say that that was going to be too late, right? The season was already going to be lost and there was no point. But I could say the same, 5 games in. There's no point of firing him right now, just because if you're going to fire him this early, you might as well have done it before the season started, because now I feel like this unravels a whole chain of events where, looking at Robert Saleh, and maybe he wasn't the top head coach, right? Obviously, he had a losing record with the New York Jets, but still, now you're thinking about all the questions that pop up. Is the defense going to perform the same? Because Robert Saleh was a defensive head coach. The locker room, how is it feeling? There were some reports, I think from Jordan Schultz, that said that a lot of the defensive players were shocked that this happened. And, is that going to divide the locker room in any which way? By some guys thinking that this was an awful decision to take, or some guys wanting this to happen? How is that going to affect the locker room? Does Rodgers now have full control? That was the idea, right? Before, that's what most people thought, that Rodgers, this was his team now, and Robert Saleh was almost undercut by him. But does he have full control now? And should he have full control now is another thing. And, the blame now that Robert Saleh is out the door, is going to fall fully on Aaron Rodgers. And, what's funny about Aaron Rodgers now being the guy that's going to be the main target of looked at as the scapegoat potentially if things keep going bad. It's so ironic how that this past offseason, how you're looking at all the changes that the Jets have made. General Manager Joe Douglas bringing in Rodgers, bringing in the offensive line pieces, improving everywhere it seemed like. And the narrative around that was that everyone was praising him for doing that. And now that the head coach is gone and this roster is still not performing, even though you pretty much have everything you need or everything you ask for, it's so Jets-like, I feel like, now to still be wanting something else right at this point in time, and still desiring like, oh, we need Devontae Adams now to come in. That wasn't the idea originally, right? And I just feel like now firing the head coach Robert Saleh at this point in time, it just feels like it was so just premature at this moment in time, and this is very unlike the New York Jets, right? As funny as I may think, right? This is the first time ever that owner Woody Johnson, in his 25-year tenure, that he's fired a head coach during the season. It's the first time the Jets have made an in-season coaching change since Lou Holtz resigned in the final game in 1976. It's the third time ever the New York Jets as an organization have made an in-season coaching change just in general. So for as much as the Jets have maybe looked like an unstable organization, they don't really do this too often. To put it into perspective, Adam Gase, not to bring back some traumatic memories for fans out there, but he wasn't even fired during the regular season or anything like that. They gave until the end, and of course the pressure with Adam Gase was obviously nowhere near what it is right now, but Robert Saleh probably had double the success that Adam Gase had, and he came in to try and fix all the mistakes that he made. So he had a losing record. I understand all of that. And if there was always going to be this decision, of course they weren't going to get rid of Rodgers or bench him or anything like that. They weren't going to they weren't going to get rid of Nathaniel Hackett, obviously, right? Because that's Aaron Rodgers' guy. So Robert Saleh was always going to be the first one up, but I just feel like I would feel better about this decision if it came a little bit later, right? Because you're 2-3 on the season. I know they haven't played well. The connection with Garrett Wilson doesn't look great. They're not running the ball for whatever reason. And a lot of the mistakes, it feels like, are offensive. So again, firing the defensive-minded head coach doesn't make too much sense to me at this point in time. So that's some of the issues I have. Andre, welcome to the show. Guaranteed this is what Rodgers wanted. That could be the case. I haven't seen anything that mentions Rodgers being, a advocate for getting rid of Saleh, but we all saw the awkward interactions. I talked about it on here, Robert Saleh mentioning the cadence issue and how ridiculous I thought it was. All of that go against Robert Saleh staying as the head coach, right? But still, I can't think of too many times where a head coach firing is a situation where now this team is going to be elevated to Super Bowl contention. Also, Andre, how do the Jets just let this guy come in and let him make all the decisions when he's not even winning games for them? I'm assuming you're meaning Aaron Rodgers, right? So, it just comes with being Aaron Rodgers, right? As simple as it may sound and as, insane as it may sound, the Jets have never had anyone like Aaron Rodgers, right? Since Joe Namath, right? So obviously that comes with it. Rodgers was always going to have that kind of decision power, right? Like you're alluding to, because of the fact that the Jets were desperate so much for a quarterback like this, and it seemed like they had everything in place. So once they got that final piece, they were always going to do everything that it seems like Rodgers wanted, bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb as well. So, it's not a great thing that happens in sports, but it's a reality, right? So with that being the case now, maybe it's something that Aaron Rodgers felt that needed to happen, but still now, with Robert Saleh gone, and he was always going to be the first one gone, now everything falls on Aaron Rodgers, right? It almost feels like there's nowhere else to hide now at this point. Now, if there was any hesitancy about Rodgers before, maybe it's not him, it's always on Robert Saleh. Now we're really going to see, right? If this offense hasn't changed or if this team doesn't play any better, it's going to fall on Rodgers. And once it falls on Rodgers, it's going to fall on the entire organization, and everything is going to come crumbling down. So it's a decision that I hate. Again, I have to stress it. I don't really understand it. And now their defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, will be the interim head coach going forward. So, we'll see how that goes. It's a very weird situation now for the Jets because, again, they're 2-3 after 5 games. They have a chance to be first in the AFC East if they win their next upcoming game against the Bills. So it's not like they're last or they have one win or something like that. And Rodgers is playing awful. He's not playing good, but I feel like there are some moments where he has shown you a little bit of something. And to fire the head coach now, I don't necessarily think it fixes the offense. And does this mean that you still go out and get Devontae Adams? Is he going to want to be here now with Jeff Ulbrich as the head coach and this unstable environment around the New York Jets? That could be something that is affected by this. And I don't feel like this makes any drastic change to the Jets. And if we're going to talk Super Bowls and the expectations for them, you'll never see the Chiefs. You'll never see the 49ers, even the Lions now at this point, or the Ravens, or any organization like that. You'll never see them make a move or have this circus of events happening in their organization. So to have this change happen now, and why I feel like it's so unnecessary, is because it doesn't get you anywhere closer to where you want to be. So I don't really see the point in doing all of this, at least through 5 games. Maybe if you lose the next one and the one after that, okay, then something needs to change. But I never felt that Robert Saleh was really the main culprit. It always felt like the game planning on offense, how much they used Breece Hall the last couple of weeks, throwing too much with Aaron Rodgers, not protecting him well enough. All these things I would have thought of first before we got to Robert Saleh. But I felt like this was an easy decision, the premature panic decision, like I mentioned before. And it's more of the Jets being the New York Jets, right? That same moniker that everyone uses, right? I think this just falls right in line with it, and I'm not a big fan of it. And now, if anything, increases the pressure more on this team. Now that you got rid of your head coach, right? Now what are you going to do? I think it puts more of an emphasis now in the next game to go out and perform, because if they don't, then who's going to be looked on? It's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and then you have all of that criticism falling on him. And why does it fall on him? Because they decided to bring him in, and now you're questioning everything that you did to bring all of this big project together. You're questioning everything, and that's not what you need, being 6 games in at this point. So I'm not a big fan of it. Let me know what you guys think of it. Robert Saleh was going to be the first one to go, but still, I felt like it was so unnecessary to do it now. I thought it was fake, but the Jets are going a different direction. They just felt apparently that they needed to change something, and they felt like this could give them a spark. We'll see how that pans out on their Monday Night Football game when they face the Buffalo Bills. But that'll be that topic. We're going to move on to another not so positive quarterback situation in Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns drop another game to the Washington Commanders. We're going to talk about that, the Commanders and how impressive they are, but mainly the Browns. And should they bench Deshaun Watson going forward? The answer seems clear, but the Browns still remain very hesitant on doing so. So we're going to talk about that after this break. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the show to talk about some more games, recapping a couple from Sunday's Week 5 slate that we had. And I had to make sure to bring this one up because the Cleveland Browns, more of the same, pretty much more of the same performances, another loss, but still the quarterback situation is what I mainly want to talk about after getting into this game. One of the hottest teams in the NFL faced one of the worst teams, on the brink of imploding on themselves, meaning the Browns. The Washington Commanders defeated Cleveland 34-13 in what was another class game by the Commanders, but also Washington now wins their 4th straight game, and the Browns lose another one and drop to 1-4. The Browns are already, looking at last season and now into this year, the Browns are already 2 losses away from matching the total amount of losses that they had in 17 games last year. They're just 2 games away from having the same amount of losses as they did last year, and we're only 6 games, 5 weeks in, pretty much. So it kind of gives you an idea of how bad the situation really is. Just compared to a year ago, not much has changed with this team, but now they're just drastically different. It's something to really worry about. And looking at this game and how it panned out, obviously, I mean, I picked the Commanders to win this game, but I didn't think it was going to be so drastic, at least from the Browns side of things. Jaden Daniels, though, he was 14 of 25 for 238 yards. He only threw 1 touchdown, and he also threw an interception in this game, but still, he had a good day through the air regardless of that. And Jaden Daniels also led all of Washington in rushing too, with 11 carries for 82 yards, and Brian Robinson also tacked on 2 touchdowns as well. Terry McLaurin had another solid game, 4 receptions, 112 yards. Daimi Brown scored that long touchdown and added to his 57-yard day. And on the other side, now talking about the Browns, Deshaun, while he might not have thrown an interception, he was 18 of 28 for 125 yards and a touchdown. The running game, again, not too many people talk about it. A lot of the blame does go to Deshaun, but still, the running game was pretty absent again, not existent again from Jerome Ford and Dante Foreman and these guys. And Amari Cooper led all wide receivers with 4 receptions and 60 yards. And just on that topic a little bit here for a second before we talk about the game. Yes, Deshaun probably deserves and should get a lot of the blame, but I think the idea of how they game plan these games sometimes is lost on people that might not put as much emphasis on that. Because if your running game is not that very good, you're going to tell me that a lot of the times you're down in these games, right? And that's not a good thing to have, right? But in this game, they were pretty close throughout the first couple drives there. So not establishing your running game enough, now you're making Deshaun throw it even more, because if you're not running the ball and let's say you go down like you have in most of these games up until this point, now you have to pass, right? Now you're trying not to lose and you have to try and catch up, which means that you open the possibility of Deshaun Watson throwing it a lot more. And that's where we get him holding on to the ball too long, getting sacked a bunch of times, fumbles and things like that, just being very flustered and panicked, not playing with a lot of confidence. And I think while it might be on him as well, it also is on the fact that the running game is just not as efficient. And I'm sure if they had Nick Chubb in there, and that's why it's so important that he comes back, if they had Nick Chubb in there and he was any resemblance of what he was over the last 2 years, they would run the heck out of this ball. They'd probably run it like 30 times per game. And Deshaun, the amount of possibility that he has to make a mistake gets reduced because he's not passing it as much. That's something that always stands out to me when I'm looking at the games and how it all breaks down. The running game is a big portion of why the Browns really just are so inefficient on offense as well. But looking at this game as well, like I mentioned, it was pretty close in the first half. The first drive of the game was pretty suspect because the Browns had the ball and they turned it over on downs after just 5 plays, which I understand that you're pretty desperate, but the first drive of the game is a little bit like too extreme to that extent. So I didn't understand that, but Cleveland's defense came out to play, and they have pretty much the entire season, other than maybe the Cowboys game. But every game the defense has been putting in a decent performance, right? Other than the Cowboys game and now this one, I don't think they've let up more than like 21 or 23 points or something like that. So it's really not on them at the end of the day, right? It looks bad because they're losing games, but really in this game you saw it where they were forcing a punt and they had an interception early in this game, but they had no points from it. And while that is great that you get the ball back for your offense, the offense has to help you out a little bit there and at least get something. But the Browns got no points off of their interception as well. And now Washington starts to get a little bit of their momentum going, right? They get their first touchdown, but Cleveland was close towards the end of the first half, and it was only 10-3, pretty much. And you're thinking, the defense is playing very well. They're keeping us in it. And the offense, well, they only scored 3 points. We're still in this game, right, going into the second half. And then, from that point on, the mistake was the 2 touchdowns allowed. It was 10-3 at the end of the first quarter. At the end of the half, you're looking at a situation where there was about 6 minutes left, and the Browns defense kind of showed a lapse in performance and execution, and they allowed 2 touchdowns in the matter of 6 minutes there towards the end of the first half. And instead of being down 10-3 like it would have been, they were down 24-3. And at that point, now you're down 3 touchdowns, so you're thinking we're gonna have to throw pretty much every play now going forward. And even still, after halftime, the defense created another turnover by recovering a fumble on the first drive for Washington, but they only managed to get a field goal, while Washington scored another touchdown right after that. So while the Browns are only getting 3 points, the Commanders are cashing in and are adding 4 additional points on top of their field goal. So with their touchdowns that they're scoring. So at that point, it was 31-6, and the game's pretty much over after that. The offense wasn't really contributing as much as the defense was, and now we get to the performance of Deshaun Watson, right, in this game. What more is there to say? He was sacked 7 times. He lost the fumble, another turnover as well. He has the worst QBR in the NFL through 5 weeks. 21 is his QBR in general, and he had an 8 QBR against Washington on Sunday, which is extremely, extremely low. Obviously, to have an 8 as a QBR is insane. He has been sacked 26 times already, which is the most in the NFL, 8 more than Geno Smith, who is in second place. And there was a one moment to start the second half where I thought, like most people thought, that Deshaun Watson, quote unquote, quit on his team, where it looked like he was just walking off the field on a 4th down, and Kevin Stefanski looked very defeated, and not a lot of people knew why or what went into that. But I read an article afterwards, actually this morning, that said that Deshaun counted that there was 12 people in the huddle, so they were going to get flagged, so there was no reason to go for it anyway, so he just walked off the field. And that does save it a little bit, because if he did just walk off the field, and you saw the look on Kevin Stefanski's face, how defeated he was, then we really had an even bigger problem. But now you can kind of understand it there, and that kind of just speaks to Deshaun Watson obviously having a lot to do with the lack of success for the Browns, but also the lack of concentration to have 12 guys in the huddle, now just adding insult to injury, is it's not helping anybody. And afterwards, after this game, you might be thinking, like, is it time now? Or the Browns actually going to make a change? And Kevin Stefanski says afterwards in the post-game conference that they're not going to change quarterbacks. And it just feels like, I don't know, like, to say that you're not going to change quarterbacks and say that you have to play better, or that you have to coach better and the team has to play better, it's like there's just no point in asking these questions, or even like talking about this situation, if the own team, the own coach isn't really going to consider it a possibility, when it feels like it's so obvious right now. And I kind of feel bad for Kevin Stefanski now, because it feels like this might be out of his control. And now you're talking about bringing in the conversation around Deshaun Watson's contract and how that affects the idea of benching him or not, right? Do you bench the guy that is guaranteed $230 million that's just sitting on your bench, just out of spite and just sitting there doing nothing? It doesn't look great on the organization, right? And it's already looking like the worst trade in NFL history. That's what the story's going to be if and when I expect the Browns to finally bench him. That for as much as they gave up to him and how the Texans look right now, I'm sure this is going to be one of, if not the worst trade in NFL history. And now I think we're starting to see the the initial beginnings of it, because before it was that he was injured, it was that he needs to get acclimated, and now, you're in year 3, I believe, and there's no injuries, and still you have the same exact team, but the only thing that's changed from the end of last year, where the Browns looked very good, is the quarterback. The 40-year-old quarterback that they got rid of in free agency is now playing pretty well in Indianapolis, and now the Browns are sort of stuck in a bad place, a very bad place to be as an organization, where it feels like the decisions that need to be made to improve the performances on the field go beyond just the performances on the field, right? It seems like we're talking about contracts and how ownership and maybe the general manager don't want to bench Deshaun Watson because of that contract. And then, once we're talking about that, the play on the field, which should be the most important thing, becomes secondary, it feels like. And you can't operate as an organization that's trying to win games in that manner. So that's why I say I kind of feel bad for Kevin Stefanski. And the Browns right now are last in the AFC North. And while it might look awful that they're 1-4 right now and they have the hardest schedule, it doesn't feel entirely too late, right? Because they have Nick Chubb coming back, but they need to do something, right? They need to do something because their next couple games are at Philly. For as questionable as Philadelphia has been, they haven't been the Browns, as bad as the Browns. So I'm not really confident in that game. Then afterwards, they host the Cincinnati Bengals. They're also 1-4, but you can make an argument that they probably could have won all of their games, maybe except the Commanders game. Then they host the Baltimore Ravens, who have just won 3 straight games in a row. So I can't see Deshaun Watson still being the quarterback after all 3 of those games. It can't happen. It's impossible for that to be the case, because if that's the case, then we're not really evaluating on things on the field, right? And it just becomes a different matter, right? Not just football related. So it's not too late yet for the Browns, but they need to change something. Maybe 2 weeks max. This upcoming game against the Eagles, Deshaun's probably going to start, but probably after that, maybe even after the Bengals game. That's as late as it'll go. But if it goes beyond that, then there's no point in talking about Deshaun being benched, because the Browns obviously have different reasons to keep him on there, right? If that makes sense. So that's where the Browns stand. We didn't talk too much about the Commanders because I think everything's pretty much been said about them. They look legit this year, so next week's game against the Ravens is going to be a great one, but we'll preview that later on in the week. Right now, we're going to move on to another game that I thought hasn't been talked about enough, and that was the Cardinals' comeback win against the San Francisco 49ers, a division game that went down to the wire. And we're going to break it down, talk about the good that we saw from the Commanders, but also the bad that we saw from the 49ers. So we'll be right back with that. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping right back into the action now, one of the games that I was pretty much glued to my screen watching over the weekend was the game between the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers. And while I did pick the 49ers to win this game, it was close. They almost won the game, but credit to the Arizona Cardinals, right? One of the more underrated games we had on this Sunday. And the Arizona Cardinals stunned the San Francisco 49ers on the road at Levi Stadium with a 24-23 win. Both teams are now 2-3, but Arizona is above the San Francisco 49ers in the division in the NFC West. The Cardinals stand in second place because of the head-to-head wins, a better divisional record than the 49ers. They're only a game back now, I believe, because Seattle lost of the Seahawks. The Seahawks are in first, the Cardinals are in second, while the Rams find themselves in last place. And Who would have thought that, right? At the beginning of the year, you probably would have flipped that entire table on its head. But the Seahawks are playing pretty well despite their loss to the Giants, and the Cardinals certainly showing some fight that they have in this game. And one important note to make of this game was the injury to 49ers kicker Jake Moody. It proved to be a big blow in this game for a major reason, right, that I'll get into in the breakdown of the game. But he was diagnosed with a high ankle sprain, I believe, so he didn't return in this game, and it proved to be a big point, obviously, in the second half. But looking at the performances from this game, Kyler Murray had a very efficient day, I would say, 19 of 30 for 195 yards, 1 touchdown, and he also threw 1 interception to Nick Bosa. James Conner, 19 carries for 86 yards, pretty decent day. Very good towards the end of the game, especially with some big first downs. And Kyler Murray also added 83 yards on the ground, 50 of them coming all in one play on that rushing touchdown that he had to start the game. And Michael Wilson, for those of you that don't know his name, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, number 14. He had 5 receptions for 78 yards, a couple big-time grabs, as well as stepping up where Marvin Harrison Jr. was really taken away most of the game up until that big 4th down catch that he had. He really wasn't too active in this game, but Michael Wilson, he had a decent game for himself. Trey McBride also contributed with a good couple grabs there. But on the other side, the 49ers, right? Looking at these stats, you would probably think that they won this game pretty easily, but Brock Purdy had like 244 yards, a touchdown, but 2 interceptions. Jordan Mason, 89 yards, 14 carries, not too great, but, not awful by any means. Brandon Ayuk had a fantastic day, 8 receptions for 147 yards, and George Kittle added on a touchdown as well as 8 receptions as well and 64 yards to that 49ers offense. And it felt like, just looking at this game and how it broke down, starting off with Arizona scoring on their first drive, Kyler Murray taking it to the house on that 50-yard touchdown, throwing up the peace sign, throwing up his arm from the 40-yard line of all places to know that he was just going to score from that was awesome. And that was great for the Cardinals, right, to kind of throw the first punch, right? But from that point on, I thought San Francisco did a really good job of taking control with a field goal and then a touchdown on back-to-back drives to make it 10-7. And then San Francisco's defense was really playing well to hold the Cardinals to field goals and punts up until it was 10-13 when it was starting to change a little bit here. And the 49ers special teams blocked a field goal and they returned it for a touchdown that made it 10-13 and turned it into a 10-20 game from that point on. And that was a crusher, right? Because the Cardinals were about to tie the game and now they're down 10 points, right? A huge swing there in terms of momentum. And the 49ers tacked on another field goal after that and they led 23-10 at halftime. But what was important after that field goal block was the point that I made earlier with Jake Moody. Once they returned it for a touchdown, right, they kicked the extra point and whatever, they kicked it back off to the Cardinals, right? And I'm pretty sure it was DJ Dallas, I believe, is the returner's name for the Cardinals. He had a big return regardless. And Jake Moody was actually the one that kind of met him in the middle there and tried to tackle him. Credit to him for trying to tackle him. But you kind of saw that his foot got lodged underneath him, kind of got stuck in the turf. And it really bent in a pretty severe way where Jake Moody right away was holding his ankle. And it didn't take long for doctors and the 49ers to announce that he wasn't coming back. And that's important because in the second half, the 49ers, I want to say, had 4 possessions in the second half, and they had 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions and 1 fumble, and 1 turnover on downs. And it was so drastic like that because they weren't able to kick field goals, right? They had to be more aggressive. They had to go for it on 4th downs, obviously, right? And a lot of the times, almost all of them, they had turnovers, right? And it just led to decisions where they weren't going to take them, obviously, if they had a kicker, but they weren't going to let their punter try 30, 40-yard field goals, right? and not even give themselves the chance. So that really affected the outcome of this game because from that point on, Arizona got an interception off of Brock Purdy on San Francisco's first drive, and in the second half, now only getting 3 points from that interception they had off of Brock Purdy. Now it's 13-23, and also from that point on, it was just field goal after another turnover on downs by the 49ers, and the Cardinals got closer. They scored a touchdown there in the fourth quarter, I believe, and then also you had the turnover, the fumble by Jordan Mason, and the Cardinals were just getting every break because they knew that every time they crossed over half field, right, it wasn't a field goal scenario, right? The 49ers had to quite literally go the length of the field to score touchdowns on every single time because they can't kick field goals. So it led to more plays being had in the second half, and the Cardinals defense coming up with those turnovers, a couple unfortunate ones with interceptions on tipped balls, but regardless of that, the fumble on Jordan Mason was a great play by them, and they had a great running game in the second half with James Conner and Kyler Murray getting huge first downs to really tire out the 49ers defense. And I mentioned the big catches by Marvin Harrison Jr., by Michael Wilson, and executing in the red zone as well was huge for the Cardinals to kind of chip away until they finally took the lead 24-23, and it was a last interception there towards the end of the game where Brock Purdy threw his second interception, and that was pretty much the game. After the Cardinals came back from being down at most like 13 points, 23-10 at halftime, they scored 14 unanswered points, holding the 49ers scoreless in the second half, and now it's a point where the Cardinals got such an unexpected win that they are in second place now. And I think just from watching this game, the Cardinals certainly have an offensive punch, right? They can harm you on the offensive side of the ball with Kyler Murray, right? Just his abilities throwing and running. James Conner, Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson stepping up a little bit more, Trey McBride. They have some guys on offense, but this is twice now. I think it more says it about the 49ers in this game. I think I learned more about them or really took away more from this game from the 49ers side of it, because this is twice now that the 49ers have given up leads in the second half, really fourth quarters, and both times to divisional opponents. The 49ers are 0-2 in the NFC West right now, and they'd be in last place, if you'd believe it, if the Los Angeles Rams had won their game against the Packers, saying they were also 2-3, because they have that win over the 49ers. The Rams would be ahead of them if they were 2-3. The Cardinals are ahead of them because they're 2-3. So the 49ers could have been last if the Rams would have won. They weren't clearly 1-4. That's kind of like getting a real idea of where the 49ers stand right now. And, an idea of talking about how worried I am about the 49ers and am I concerned with Brock Purdy and the 49ers just as a whole, as an overall team, I would say I'm not really there yet. I'm not 100% concerned about them yet because I need to see Christian McCaffrey come back, obviously. And that's a sensitive topic as well because he's dealing with Achilles tendonitis, and I would feel very nervous if I had to manage that. So, that's up in the air. And really just the ideas around the 49ers and how they've been performing. You look at Deebo Samuel, and I couldn't believe it when I saw that he had 3 targets and 1 reception throughout the entire day. And that obviously can't happen. If you have all these weapons, you can't have Deebo so low in terms of contributing. And if the defense is taking away Brandon Ayuk like they probably should have, you got to go and try and find Deebo to kind of make it easier for yourself. So that was something that just can't happen again. The interceptions are unfortunate because they were tipped balls, but what's really interesting about this is that the defense, I feel like I would say I'm most concerned about, right? The 49ers as a team, I need to see them get healthy, but really the defense, if I had to pick one, I just feel like needs to step up a little bit more. They need to toughen up, and it looked like in the game against the Rams that the passing game, they were like overwhelmed by it, right? Matthew Stafford was hitting long pass after long pass and really killing them that way. And now in this game, it looked like they were very susceptible to the running. And, you can't have both, right? You can give up one, maybe, one side of it. But to give up both in games like this against the NFC West, that's really what I would point to for the 49ers, because their offense, I think, is going to be all right. Your kicker gets hurt, so you can't kick field goals. If that didn't happen and they kick like 1-2, they probably end up winning this game. But the defense is something that I wasn't expecting to talk about as being very susceptible in the second half. So that is something I would say. But credit to the Cardinals as well. Credit to the Cardinals for toughening it out, not giving up, obviously, and getting something going in the second half. That's a huge win for them. Now they're in second place, so they're going to surprise a lot of people, I feel like. While they might not have everything on offense, they're a solid team. And I like what Jonathan Gannon's doing. I've been a fan of him as well. And once they fix that offense up a little bit more, and that defense as well, certainly, more so the defense, they're going to be a decent team. So the 49ers dropped to 2-3. And the Cardinals now in second place in the NFC West. Big win for them. But we got one more topic to talk about on today's show. We started this episode talking about the New York Jets. Now we're going to conclude it with talking about them and their performance over in London against the Minnesota Vikings. Another loss for them led to the firing of Robert Saleh, obviously. But what happened in that game? What can we take away from it? And how does that impact them going forward as well? We'll be right back with that topic. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, concluding it similarly to how we started today's show, talking about the Jets and their decision to fire Robert Saleh. We couldn't go too far into the week without talking about their performance in London. It was the first international game of 2024, and it went to the Minnesota Vikings this time around, this past Sunday, when they defeated the Jets 23-17 over there in London. Minnesota stays undefeated, obviously, at 5-0, and the Jets lose their second consecutive game. They are now 2-3. And I, unfortunately, couldn't watch this game too much because I had to work, unfortunately. So looking at it afterwards and watching a bit of it at work as well, it was not such a dominant win, if you would say that, based on how, everything all panned out. You talk about the 3 interceptions to Aaron Rodgers and the Vikings offense being what it is and defeating the Texans, beating the Packers as well. It felt like, 23-17 didn't do it justice, or it wasn't a score that you'd expect from an undefeated team facing the Jets and all the troubles that they were facing as well. So the score was a little bit deceptive, but I think it just felt like a performance where the Vikings just really weren't up to par. And I think Justin Jefferson mentioned something like that in his post-game press conference as well. But looking at the performances as well, you could kind of tell, Sam Darnold was 14 of 31 for 179 yards. He threw an interception, no touchdowns for him, passing-wise. No real production from the rushing game this time around. Aaron Jones, I believe, got hurt in this game, and Ty Chandler didn't add too much after that. Both of them combined had about 30 touches in this contest, and Justin Jefferson had 6 receptions for 92 yards, and no touchdowns in this game. The only one that had like this sort of production out of the receiving group, and even still, you don't talk about Justin Jefferson. There was the past games where other guys stepped up, and offensively it just looked like, credit to the Jets defense as well, that the Vikings were a little bit off in this game. So that didn't stop them from winning, obviously, because Aaron Rodgers, you look at it from the other side, 29 of 54 on the day, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions on the day. Rushing, for as non-existent as the Vikings were, the Jets as well, pretty much not there. 14 total carries, 36 total yards between Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. Insane. And Garrett Wilson, he had a solid day. 13 receptions for 101 yards and a touchdown. Probably, if I'm not mistaken, his best game so far this year with Aaron Rodgers, but it obviously wasn't enough. And now we look at this game and how it all kind of unraveled pretty quickly for the Jets, right? Because the Jets, they forced the first turnover of the game by strip sacking Sam Darnold and recovering it. And now it was 3-0 Minnesota at that point, and Minnesota responded with 2 consecutive interceptions on Aaron Rodgers after that. And it was first it was the pick 6 by Alex Van Ginkel, which made it 10-0, and then the following drive, Minnesota got another interception on Aaron Rodgers. It was Cameron Bynum, where Aaron Rodgers kind of overthrew a pass intended for Garrett Wilson. It was a pretty ambitious pass, if I'm going to be honest. There was a lot of Vikings players there, and he would kind of try to throw it over the first defender and have it landed between both of them, but he clearly sailed it, and it fell right into the hands of Cameron Bynum. And Minnesota and the Jets really couldn't take advantage of these chances because Minnesota failed to convert on a 4th down right after that, going back to the point of them not really being on their A game on the offensive side of the ball. Then the Jets also failed on another 4th down on that following drive, and both finally scored a touchdown towards the end of the game, or towards the end of the half, I should say, making it 17-7 at that point. And then in the second half, it was kind of more of the same. It was pretty rough, honestly. The first 8 drives, 2 of them were field goals, and everything else was just pretty much punts after that. So the score only ended up being at 10-20 at that point, and it felt like something needed to break the monotony of this game at that point from what I saw afterwards. And the Jets were the ones to kind of fill that void, right? They got that interception on Darnold, and they scored a touchdown after that, so they made it 20-17. And now you're thinking, are the Jets really gonna pull this off after Aaron Rodgers has thrown 3 interceptions, and the Vikings, could we see their first potential loss here, right? But that effort fell short after Stephon Gilmore had another interception, the final and 3rd interception on Aaron Rodgers to seal it, and the Vikings end up winning this game 23-17, like I mentioned. And Minnesota, again, for as pedestrian as they were on offense, considering what we saw out of them through the first 4 weeks, the Jets just made too many mistakes, it felt like, to overcome, right? You're not going to win a game with Aaron Rodgers first throwing 3 interceptions, obviously, right? But the 54 times throwing the ball, 40-year-old quarterback, going to be 41 in December, insane. Probably the craziest thing I've mentioned on here, right? For as much as we talked about Deshaun and the Browns not benching him, the own Jets talking about are actually firing their head coach, Robert Saleh. Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball 54 times might be the craziest thing that we've gone over today. Because it's not only that game that he throws 54 times. Last game he threw it 42 times in what was basically like a hurricane in MetLife. So that's about like 96 times, if I'm not mistaken, if my math is correct, over the last 2 games. And like, this isn't 2012 Aaron Rodgers. This isn't 2015 3-time MVP Aaron Rodgers, right? We're talking about, Good quarterback still, but 40 years old, you can't have him throwing this much. Obviously, it can't happen, and it's not even only that. It's the fact that they're not even using their running backs for whatever reason. Like I mentioned, in this game, Braylon Allen and Breece Hall, I think, combined for, what was it, like 36 yards between the both of them, and they touched the ball 14 times total between both of them. And in that first half, what was it? It was like 10-3 in the first half going into it, and actually 17-7. But even still, you're not down like 3 scores or whatever. You could have still ran the ball, and I just don't understand that. Combined with Aaron Rodgers throwing it over 50 times, it doesn't make sense, honestly, and especially against this defense, right? Because it's too many throwing opportunities to not make a mistake against a great defense. And the Vikings defense has arguably been the best defense in the entire year so far. Huge credit to Brian Flores as well because of that. But knowing how good they were and how Brian Flores likes to bring a lot of pressure, obviously, as well, to just have Aaron Rodgers sitting back there and Brian Flores just teeing off after him, blitz after blitz, especially in that second half, you can't have your 41-year-old quarterback get hit that much, obviously. So it's too many opportunities for this great defense to not take advantage of a couple, and they did. They turned Aaron Rodgers over 3 times. I forget how many times they sacked him, but they really got some good licks on him there in the second half, and he's dealing with a sprained ankle now. He got hit a couple harder times afterwards as well, and you can't throw it this much. It's too easy for opposing defenses to know that you're not going to run the ball, and to just send blitzes on an immobile quarterback is just a recipe for failure right at this point. And it adds on to the idea of firing Robert Saleh. This idea, this scheme that they have going in New York, it feels too, maybe not predictable, but too stagnant, where there's not enough deception, where opposing defenses kind of know that Aaron Rodgers is just going to sit back there. He's going to try and pick you apart, and if you get to him, there's a good chance you're going to sack him because he can't move that well anymore. So with that all being the case, I like Aaron Rodgers in this situation in New York. I thought that it was going to work a lot better than this, obviously, and I just felt like the Jets were going to be better prepared to help him out as much that he needed to at this point in his career. Again, he's not the same old Aaron Rodgers. Yes, he was going to be the final piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't mean that he's the entire puzzle, right? He's not every single piece of it. He can't do everything or the majority of it on offense, and I feel like something's not really going right on the offensive side of the ball, which is leading to these underwhelming performances that we see, and it's weird because we saw them. I mean, I guess it's not weird because they beat the Patriots, and they're not going to be good this year, obviously. So maybe that was the anomaly, right? Where we thought the first couple games were these get rid of the rust anomaly sort of games. Maybe we were wrong, and the game against the Patriots was the anomaly, and maybe we're going to see more of these performances going forward. That's the kind of idea and narrative that you have to change with this organization, with this offense going forward. And it's not the ideal situation, obviously, to be in. But after this loss, it's hard to get worse, obviously, after this. And with the firing of Robert Saleh, obviously, it's not going to make it any easier. Now it's really going to be all on Aaron Rodgers. And you can't have the pressure be all on him and rely on him 100% to do everything, right? They just have to help him out a little bit. Their defense is playing well, but we need to see more from that offense. And I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett's going to change or Aaron Rodgers is going to change the game plan, but something definitely needs to evolve to get better results. It's not over by any means. They're not done or anything like that, but you need to see more because of the fact that you're still in the race for the division, and the Bills on that point aren't playing great overall. So it's still there. It's still there. And you can learn from this, obviously. And Garrett Wilson, hopefully this propels him to perform better. So it's not completely over, but the Jets have to move with a little bit more urgency now, right? That one guy already lost his job. Maybe somebody else could be next after that. So a tough loss for them. The Vikings stay perfect. And that's where we'll finish this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's show. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. To check out more of the Chip Shot Football podcast, tune in to the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel on YouTube to catch more coverage and topics around the NFL in a variety of different ways. And lastly, don't forget to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more storylines, debates, discussions around everything in the NFL week to week of the regular season. Thanks again for watching. I've been your host, Manny Maradiege. I'll see you guys back here tomorrow to talk some more about the NFL.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.